This week on Dialogue, Egypt and the Middle East after Mubarak. Welcome to the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. I'm John Molesky. Each week, Dialogue explores the world of ideas and issues in international affairs, history, and culture. Our guests today are Barbara Slavin. Barbara is a contributor to AOL News and ForeignPolicy.com. Previously, she served as assistant managing editor for world and national security at the Washington Times and also as senior diplomatic reporter for USA Today. Aaron Miller is a former Middle East negotiator for Republican and Democratic administrations, having served as an advisor to 6 secretaries of state. He is currently a public policy scholar here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. David Ottaway is a senior scholar at the Wilson Center. Previously, he served as a foreign correspondent and a national security and investigative reporter for the Washington Post. From 1981 to 1985, he was the paper's Cairo bureau chief. Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
David, I want to begin with revisiting a session you did here in January on Tunisia, where you urged caution about what might happen next, but you did name Egypt as one of the countries that you thought was ripe for a popular uprising. What were you looking at back then that turned out to be
I had visited for 2 weeks a year ago Egypt, and you could just feel enormous social tensions. In fact, building up almost day by day, conflicts between Muslims and Christians, economic problems, strikes, spontaneous strikes in various places all across the country. Social tension, the rich and the poor, the divide between the rich and poor had grown tremendously since I was last there. There are all kinds of social tensions building up that had turned into economic tensions. And then the fact that nobody knew whether Mubarak was going to run, his son was going to come in, what was going to happen. So there was a lot of political uncertainty on top of all these tensions.
Is this the perfect storm scenario, Barbara? Is just a tipping point was reached of all the different types of things that David describes?
Well, I think you have a pattern of countries that are nominally republics that have leaders that act like kings, and as they stay in power decade after decade after decade and then try to put their sons into power after them, I think they become more vulnerable. So as David pointed out, the material was all there. The spark came from Tunisia once Egyptians saw that tiny Tunisia could get rid of an entrenched dictator. I think people began to realize they could do it themselves. And then, of course, you had this whole phenomenon of the Facebook generation, the young people who started a Facebook page in honor of a young Egyptian who'd been beaten to death, and the way that they were able to mobilize. You have youthful populations throughout this region. I see a lot of 1968, and I know you can't make a perfect analogy to any period in history, but in 1968 there was this mass of people between the ages of 18 and 25, and all across the world, certainly across the Western world, they were going out in the streets and demonstrating against the Vietnam War, for this kind of right, for that kind of right. And I think we have the same dynamic now occurring in the Middle East.
Aaron, I want to give you a shot at the question on the table, the why now question.
Right.
Why now?
I think that both Barbara and David have identified the core factors. Divisions between the haves and the have-nots, tremendous economic asymmetry, divisions between the cans and the cannots, those who can participate in the governance of their societies and those who cannot.
None of those things you're listing are new. So why now?
That's true. It was Twain who argued, and I think he was right, that history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So you look for the rhythmic patterns. I'm not sure there's quite a pattern that reflects the kind of change that we're witnessing here. Whether these are actual revolutions or not is another very important question that needs to be looked at. But I do believe the fear factor is important. Success is the world's most compelling ideology because success generates power and constituents. And once the Tunisian spark, for whatever the reason, the vegetable fruit seller who self-immolated, leading to a trigger, frustrations on the part of the population, And then the spark jumped. And it continues to jump. And in each Arab country, it manifests itself in its own unique way. The real question is, can you make any sense of the longer arc of where this is heading?
Can you make a distinction about what you're saying about the revolution, the notion of this as a revolution? You're saying, because that's become the popular term to use in
revolutions in history are rare. I mean, 1789 in France, 1917 in Russia, 1979 in Tehran. I don't believe we witnessed, with the possible exception of Libya, which may have to literally revolve and recreate itself. I don't think what you're seeing now in any of these states so far are a upturning of the social, political, and economic order. You're watching change within the existing institutions of the state where the power balance has yet to be renegotiated. So this transformation, and it is a transformation, no one can look at this and not conclude it's remarkable and extraordinary, will lead to what I call a transactional phase, when the real bargaining between the elites, the public, and the power that the regimes still maintain will have to be recalibrated.
And we'll delve into that. I don't want to rain on the parade right away, though. It's this notion of revolution. I think, Barbara, in one of your pieces, you described this as the first great democratic revolution of the 21st century.
To me, it is, yeah. I mean, I agree with Aaron. We don't know what the new shape will be. I mean, this is the result of entrenched dictators who refuse to allow any kind of path for change at the top. I mean, always, you know, they might have different prime ministers and so on. Governments might be reshuffled, ministers might be reshuffled. Although in the case of Egypt, you saw many of the same faces for 30 years. But I mean, it was the only way that people could get rid of the guy at the top was by coming out in the streets en masse. I agree with Aaron that we don't know whether they're really going to be able to change the power balance in a definitive way. I think what we do know, though, is that there will be more space. There has to be more space for different voices, different political parties, groups that have been barred from participation. Mubarak did a very effective job of preventing the creation of a second secular party. He had just his own National Democratic Party. I think that, they're not going to achieve all their goals at once. I mean, the American Revolution didn't achieve all its goals at once, as we well know. But they've started, finally, on this process. History has begun. It has resumed in a place where it had been paralyzed and just frozen in time for so long.
David, were you surprised by Mubarak's response to the protests or the military's?
No, I thought it was quite right in keeping with his character. He used force, and just the same way he's dealt with all his opposition for 30 years. So it was a natural reflex.
But he stopped short of the types of response we're seeing from Gaddafi in Libya.
He did. I think Egypt is, first of all, Egypt is much more politically evolved than Libya. It's not a tribal society, it's an urban society. And I think even Mubarak realized when he started to try and use his old tactics, while the world was there watching, that this really made him look terrible.
What about the military? Will it live up to its expectations from the protesters?
I don't think we know. What had been happening under Mubarak is the military had gotten out of politics and deep into business. That was their main concern, business, not politics.
Tourism and things like that.
Everywhere, from farms to factories to baking bread. I mean, they were in all sectors of the economy. So they had been withdrawing from politics. And now they're getting back into politics after 30 years, and I don't think they know what their role is going to be. So you just have to watch what happens as we go forward, whether they're going to stay into politics or get out of politics. I mean, Egypt now has so many problems that I would think the military would love to leave it to the civilians to sort it out.
Yeah. Aaron, we're now into this negotiating phase that you talked about. What happens if the military tells us we need a little more time before the elections take place?
The question is whether or not they can satisfy what is a rising expectations gap, head it off, preempt it, with meaningful steps on the ground. And they've taken several. Emergency regulations have not yet been lifted and probably won't be for a while. Constitutional committee has been formed with respected jurists and academics, headed, I might add, by a former Muslim Brotherhood parliamentarian. There's some brouhaha over replacing members of the former government. There are some, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmed Abu Ghaid, who's still there. But the military and the Brotherhood, in an odd way, have a kind of community of interests. And the victims in all this will be the modern liberal reformers who made billions, in large part encouraged by the United States, I might add, and witnessed extraordinary growth in the Egyptian economy with little trickle down to most ordinary Egyptians. You're going to see trials. You're already beginning to set the stage for them, and efforts to regain enormous wealth. So there is a sort of community interest which will, quote unquote, distract the masses for a while. How long it will last, I don't know. Can the secular, liberal, reformist elements, young people, middle class, can they sustain this movement? Or will they go back to their lives? And we don't know this. So my sense is you got two powerful forces here. You got the military organized. I agree with David, doesn't want to govern. You got the Ikhwan Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, probably the best organized political force in the country, being very smart about this, but very well organized. So the real question is, can these reformist elements unify in a coherent way and be smart and tough about the way they negotiate? I don't know the answer.
Barbara, I want to revisit an X factor you introduced earlier about the use of social media or internet technologies. A little bit of a tempest in a teapot when Malcolm Gladwell in the New York Times dismissed this as being, a fantasy of the cheerleaders for social media and the least important part of the story. What is your thought on that? Can we now quantify how significant a part of the story it is or was?
Look, it was very significant. It will remain very significant. I've become a convert to Twitter over the last couple of months. It's now my essential tool for finding out what's going on in the region. And, it gives a megaphone to individuals in all of these countries. Even if they don't speak English, it's translated, it's tweeted and retweeted, and you find out that such and such a barracks has fallen in Libya, and people are demonstrating in this city or this town. So I think that's going to remain important. I think the young people who've participated in this are not going to go home to their lives so quickly after what they've experienced. Aaron mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood has a generation gap too. It's divided between young people who were eager to participate and go out to Tahrir early on, and the old fogies who were afraid to go out because they were so used to being crushed by the government that they didn't want to risk anything. So you're going to see new patterns. You're going to see different Islamic parties form that, the Ikhwan can completely splinter. It's already begun. They've gotten permission for the Wasat party, the centrist party now. There's another one that I've heard that they're going to form. And so you may have a situation when it comes to elections that the fundamentalist vote is split also among different groups. And it's very difficult to say who will come out on top. I don't think we should be bleak about it. I think we should be aware of the fact that it is going to be messy, and that we can't predict. I think what's hard for a lot of people like Aaron is that there's no predictability anymore, and that bugs him. We don't have predictability. This is completely, moving on its own track now. And the young people are going to be part of it because they are 70% of the populations of most of these countries.
Is that what bugs you? Is that a fair characterization?
Well, I agree. I would like more certainty, but I'm also a historian by training. I understand that the arc of history runs in all kinds of directions. And that is, in fact, the reason for I would phrase it as the absence of breathlessness. I mean, it's impossible not to be inspired by what you see. Impossible. The Arab Berlin Wall is being torn down, and the most significant thing is it's being torn down without reference to the United States, let alone the Israelis. This is an indigenous, legitimate, authentic movement, and we should all celebrate that. It's just that history is very cruel and unkind, and has been in the past, to these sorts of movements, and it's a very long movie.
I read your metaphor of the Berlin Wall, the Arab Berlin Wall, which prompted me this morning to pick this up, and this is a piece of the Berlin Wall that I chipped, hand-chipped by me. I rented a hammer and chisel from an industrious German at the time, and so I thought I'd bring this in case we got back to that metaphor. But what's your view of this, David? You were a journalist during the fall of the Berlin Wall, too. Is this the fall of the Arab Berlin Wall? Is that useful?
In Arab terms, it kind of is. I think it kind of is. I mean, you know, history, the political history had skipped over the Arab world. Democracy had come to the rest of the world in various forms and degrees. But the Arab world was frozen. It was Rip Van Winkle time. And so, in that sense, what's happening now really is a major change.
I was thinking what Aaron said, the U.S. not playing a role. It will be ironic, but the biggest role the U.S. played has been inventing this social media, you know, and having norms that we usually don't apply to the Middle East, but we have these norms, these universal values that President Obama talks about all the time, and they are still out there as an inspiration for people. So I would say, you know, our Constitution and our social media are the biggest factor in this.
Are you saying what it does is it increases the opportunity for people-to-people diplomacy, essentially, that it's no longer just leaders talking to leaders with all the inconsistencies that Aaron's identified?
It's the spreading of information. It's being able to watch a YouTube video of people murdering a young man on the street in Egypt. You know, I mean, you never could do this before. It's being able, you know, in Iran, you could see this young woman, Neda, being murdered on the streets of Tehran. In the past, these kinds of things were done in the dark. No one ever knew, but now everybody knows.
How do you factor that? How do you account for that factor in your analysis? Is this the ultimate game changer, or is it different by a matter of degree?
The technology?
Yes.
You know, it's necessary but not sufficient. We're seeing in Libya today, where they shut down all the media, that people have found ways around. They don't need Facebook. In fact, in eastern Libya, they've been using a network based on the soccer league to get information around about what's going on. So I think it has helped. It's made it much easier for people to mobilize, to get messages out, to coordinate where you're going to do protests. But you don't necessarily. Everybody goes to the mosque on Friday. Everybody demonstrates. If they want to demonstrate at noon on Fridays, you don't need the internet to tell people to do that. You just can send a person and say, look, we want people to go out after Friday prayers. So there are other mechanisms in the Arab world for people to mobilize than Facebook. But the Libyan upheaval now is not a Facebook upheaval. And it's happening despite the fact that Facebook has been blocked and the internet, et cetera.
But is it happening in response to what happened in Egypt or what happened to Tunisia before it? Is there a domino effect underway?
Yes. Imitation. I mean, you
know,
you can do it there. If they can do it, we can do it, as somebody was saying, you know.
So Aaron,
the Egyptians said exactly that if the Tunisians can do it, El-Baradei said, if the Tunisians do it,
why not us?
Yeah.
It's a tool and an instrument, and an important one. But it won't necessarily, but not sufficient. I think David is right. It will not substitute for the absence of leaders who are enlightened rather than extractive. It will not substitute for the development or the absence of development of institutions that are broad-based, coherent, and credible. I mean, I'm just thinking about a woman who asked Ben Franklin at the end of that hot summer in 1787 what kind of government America would have. And Franklin replied, it's probably apocryphal, a republic if you can keep it. It took us. And we had non-predatory neighbors to our north and south and fish to our east and west. Incredible resources. Incredible resources. It took us to the better part of 150 years to iron out the contradictions and the anomalies and the tensions and to create something that is durable and sustainable with respect to democracy. So when you use the term democracy, it has to be done, I think, with great humility, not trivializing or undermining what's the trends that have been triggered. I don't want to do that. That's way too grim and negative. But on the other hand, we're in for a real when I say we, I'm not talking about humanity now, I'm talking about the United States. we are in for a wild ride.
Well, the UN Arab Human Development Report of 2002 identified 3 significant deficits: education, freedom, women's empowerment. These alone aren't going to change overnight.
Well, the freedom part will, at least in the ability of people to speak their minds and organize. And, you know, I mean, these countries don't have to...
Is that guaranteed?
These countries don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to go through what we went through over the last 150 years. They have the benefit of seeing what everybody else has done. And that's where modern technology and knowledge comes in. You know, in a lot of these countries, they're very capable people who just were never given an opportunity to actually apply their skills to anything. So, you know, that's why I'm not...
But Barbara, it sounds like you're taking the freedom part of the equation for granted in that it's there, now it's done, it's a done deal. But is that how we should look at this? Or is it possible that...
They've come a long way. I mean, again, we're not looking for Jeffersonian democracy or even, you know, the current state of democracy we have in this country, which has its problems. We can talk about that. We're looking for something a little bit better than what all these people have suffered through over the last 3 and 4 decades. And, you know, as long as people see that things are moving in the right direction, I don't think they're going to be asking for perfection. And I think they're going to be watching what happens. They're going to go out in Tahrir Square whenever they feel that they want to express their views. There's going to be a lot of labor unrest and so on. But as long as they see that, yes, they're getting a new constitution, there will be elections, they will have new leaders, some of the egregious crimes and corruption will be punished, I think it's going to move perhaps better than we thought. We look at Libya. Benghazi is now liberated territory. Apparently it's running rather smoothly. They've set up a sort of interim government. They've got people out on the streets directing traffic. They've collected the weapons. We shouldn't underestimate these people. Just because they haven't had the opportunity before doesn't mean they can't do it now.
You know, the other thing that's really changed is that for the first time in the Arab world, human rights really matter.
Yeah.
You can't just have a policeman, he can't just go beat somebody to death and nobody cares. In fact, it can spark revolutions. And we have never seen before the impact of human rights, which Americans have been promoting for many decades, really having an impact on what's happening and how people behave in the Arab world. This is something new in the Arab world.
What's something that's fairly remarkable to me is, as Americans having a discussion on the Middle East, the word or the nation Israel has not come up in our discussion yet. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Israel a bit and what the impact of all of this is for our most valuable ally in the region, our most trusted ally in the region.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this transformation is going to mean for us that our values, our interests, and our policies, the 3 core elements that we've never been able to align correctly, will continue to be out of whack. And it'll continue to be out of whack for 3 reasons. Number 1, we are still very much in the devil's bargain with autocratic kings and rulers, with which we cooperate with the Yemenis on counterterrorism, we cooperate with the Saudis on Iranian containment, we cooperate with the Egyptian military, the Bahrainis, the Jordanians on peace with Israel. So that's one issue that is going to mean dysfunction. Second is, we do have this relationship with the Israelis. I do not believe it's going to change. I believe, in fact, it's going to become closer, not just for reasons of domestic politics in the course of the next 18 months, but because this uncertainty will create, by definition, a louder set of voices on the Arab street, whether they're Islamist or secular nationalist in character. By definition, our policies, which most Arabs and Muslims do not like, counterterrorism, containing of Iran, acquiescence in support for Israel, the special relationship with Israel, all of these things are going to get a lot more attention. And I know us, I don't know the Arabs well, but I do know us, having spent a quarter of a century dealing with us and being one of us in government. I know the way we behave. Mm. And finally, we don't control the world. We will never be able to get to expect that our system of governance, our values, will somehow be replicated elsewhere. They can't be replicated. We are exceptional, but our exceptionalism stops and should stop at the water's edge. It's not for export. So I think the U.S.-Israeli relationship is going to get more complex with respect to the Arabs. The Arab-Israeli peace process is going to be very difficult to promote under these circumstances. I think we're in for more dysfunction, frankly.
The other thing we haven't talked about yet, the other 800-pound gorilla lurking, is oil. And the flow of oil. Tom Friedman, pretty starkly yesterday in a piece, said that we viewed this region as a collection of gas stations, and that this is time to re-examine our addiction to oil. What happens there?
Well, we've been re-examining our addiction to oil for 30 years, and
remain addicted.
It gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
Rather. So, we've been through this soul-searching many times. We're not going to do without oil, foreign imported oil, and a quarter of it or more than a quarter of it is in the Gulf. So, it's not going away. It's just kind of a realpolitik, but I don't think we're going to have a shortage of oil through all this turmoil. The Saudis alone have 4.5 million barrel a day capacity to increase above what they're producing now, and Iraq is increasing its oil output, and so is Kuwait. So there's not going to be a shortage of oil because of pro-democracy protests.
Very quick final thought. We're under a minute, but I just want to share with our viewers and listeners sort of your tip on what to be watching. What are the indicators you're going to be watching? Maybe one each, since we literally are so short on time.
I'm going to be watching Iran, because that's the other 800-pound gorilla. Mm-hmm. And to see whether this democracy movement, which in some sense began in 2009 in Iran after their disputed elections and has boomeranged back with more demonstrations, whether there are more and more demonstrations there, whether that government is going to be under threat, that will really change the picture strategically.
I'm going to be watching us to see whether or not we can dance between democratization on one hand and our interests on the other.
Threading the needle.
Are we going to engage with the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, which will be a very interesting first test?
David.
I'm going to be watching in the immediate future the impact of what's happening so far on the monarchies of the Arab world and how they deal with this.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Hope to have you all back, because obviously we're going to be talking about this for a long time. And we'll return next week with another edition of Dialogue. Until then, for all of us at the Wilson Center, I'm John Milewski. Thanks for joining us.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your questions or comments to dialogue@wilsoncenter.org. You can also follow us on Facebook. Search Dialogue Radio and Television. Our host Twitter feed is twitter.com/John Milewski. Dialogue is a co-production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars and MHZ Networks. Dialogue is available via broadcast, cable, satellite, and telco on MHZ Worldview throughout the United States. To see how to watch where you live, visit www.mhznetworks.org.